Captain Juno West had spent most of her career proving the impossible wrong. As a strategist for the Galactic Defense Alliance, GDA, she had been underestimated for years. Most species in the galaxy saw humans as emotional, unpredictable, and ultimately too weak to wield any real power. Yet, Juno had led her team to countless victories, not by overwhelming force, but by understanding her enemies and adapting faster than they could strike. It was her mind, not her strength, that had earned her respect. Her latest mission, however, was not about proving humanity's worth in battle. It was about survival, her survival, and that of her team. The Seltzer Rift, a vast and chaotic region on the edge of explored space, had become a point of growing concern. The GDA had recently intercepted signs of an impending invasion from the Theras, a race of ancient bioengineered giants who had never lost a battle. The Theras believed themselves to be the rightful rulers of the galaxy, and they had set their sights on humanity. The Seltzer Rift was a deadly stretch of space, filled with black holes, gravity wells, and radiation storms that could tear a ship apart in an instant. But more dangerous than the natural hazards were the rumors of ancient weapons hidden within the Rift artifacts from civilizations long forgotten, powerful enough to change the fate of entire empires. The Theras, it seemed, were not just a military force. They were searching for something they believed would cement their dominance over the universe. Juno's mission was simple: investigate a mysterious distress signal coming from the heart of the Seltzer Rift. The message, encoded in a language no one had seen in millennia, suggested that a lost civilization had once stood against the Theras, and the key to defeating them might lie buried in the rift. Juno's team was the best the GDA had to offer: seasoned soldiers, engineers, and intelligence officers. But even they knew that the rift was a place few survived, and fewer still returned from. The journey to the rift was long and perilous, but Juno's crew had prepared for it as best they could. Still, nothing could have prepared them for the silence that greeted them when they arrived at the source of the distress signal, a derelict station floating in the center of a massive gravitational anomaly. The station had been abandoned for centuries, its once thriving inhabitants now long gone. Their civilization lost to time. As Juno and her team boarded the station, they found it eerily intact, despite its age. The walls, covered in alien symbols, told the story of a forgotten war, a battle against an enemy that had brought an end to everything. It was here that they found the artifact. The object was unlike anything Juno had ever seen. It was not a traditional weapon, nor was it a piece of technology she could immediately understand. The artifact was a sleek, organic-looking structure that seemed to pulse with an inner light. It was alive in a way that made the hairs on the back of Juno's neck stand on end. It hummed with power, and as she approached, she felt a strange pull, an urge to reach out and touch it. Her fingers brushed the surface of the artifact, and in an instant, a surge of energy coursed through her body. Her heart raced, her vision blurred, and the world around her seemed to twist and distort. She staggered back, gasping for breath, feeling as though the very fabric of reality was shifting beneath her feet. But the feeling passed as quickly as it came, leaving her shaken but unharmed. "Captain, are you okay?" Lieutenant Kiera's voice broke through the haze. Juno blinked, trying to regain her bearings. "I'm fine," Juno managed, though she could still feel the lingering effects of the artifact's power. It had unlocked something inside her, something deep and primal. She could feel her senses heightened, her mind sharp, her body stronger than it had ever been. It was as if the artifact had amplified every part of her, pushing her beyond human limits. But with that power came a sense of unease. Something about the artifact felt wrong. She could feel its influence, like a weight pressing against her thoughts, pulling at her emotions. The stronger her connection to it became, the more intense her feelings were: her anger, her fear, even her joy. They all felt magnified, overwhelming. "We need to get back to the ship," Juno said, her voice steady despite the storm of thoughts racing through her mind. Now, the team quickly gathered the artifact and made their way back to their ship, the Vanguard. As they ascended through the rift's chaotic atmosphere, a chilling message came through the communications system, an alert from their fleet, warning of a Theras warship headed their way. "Looks like we've been found," Juno muttered, gripping the artifact tighter. They had no choice now. There was no way to outrun the Theras. And as she looked at the artifact in her hand, she realized something even more disturbing. She wasn't just holding a weapon, she had become a weapon. If they wanted to survive, she would need to unlock its power fully, and she feared what it might cost her. The Thera's ship was massive, its hull adorned with markings of their empire, built to intimidate and crush any who dared oppose them. Juno's mind raced. This wasn't just about defense anymore, it was about survival. She could feel the artifact calling to her, urging her to use its power. With no time to hesitate, Juno made her decision. The artifact's power surged again, and this time, she didn't resist it. She let the energy flow through her, letting it enhance her every thought. The world slowed as her senses sharpened. She could almost see the Thera's ship's every movement, anticipate their strategy before they even made it. "Prepare for battle," she ordered. And as the Thera's ship closed in, Juno West, the woman once seen as weak, was now something far beyond human. But at what cost? Captain Juno West had always been known for her calm, calculated approach to leadership. But ever since she had unlocked the power of the ancient artifact, something in her had begun to change. The power it granted her was undeniable. Her strength had multiplied, her mind was sharper, and her ability to predict the moves of the Theriz seemed almost supernatural. But with every passing day, the artifact's influence over her deepened, pushing her emotions and desires to extremes she had never experienced before. The first signs were subtle, brief moments of irrational anger, flashes of aggression that seemed out of character. But soon, the changes became more pronounced. Juno found herself easily losing patience with her crew, snapping at them for the smallest mistakes. The calm, diplomatic strategist was slipping away, replaced by a woman who acted on impulse and instinct. Her decisions, once carefully weighed, were now fueled by a burning need for victory and a growing hunger to prove humanity's place in the galaxy. Juno tried to resist. She tried to maintain control, to stay the leader her crew had always relied on. But the artifact was powerful, and its influence was undeniable. Each time she called upon it, the connection between them grew stronger, and with it, the artifact had become more than just a tool. It had become a part of her, and it was starting to twist her, to shape her into something that felt more alien with each passing day. As Juno's transformation progressed, tensions within the Galactic Defense Alliance, GDA, began to escalate. The T-Zoer, an enigmatic species of towering, intellectual beings, had always been wary of humanity. They viewed the human race as unpredictable and dangerous, but they had reluctantly allowed the humans to join the GDA, believing that their unique adaptability could be an asset. Now, however, the T-Zoer were growing increasingly concerned about the artifact's influence on Captain West and on humanity as a whole. "I don't like this," T-Zoer Ambassador Sareth said, pacing in the command room of the Vanguard. "We're gambling with forces we don't fully understand. If we allow humans to harness this artifact, we could be sowing the seeds of our own destruction." Sareth's concerns were shared by others within the GDA. Some of the more cautious factions believed that the artifact's power was too great to be trusted in the hands of humanity. They worried that, should Juno or any other human ever decide to use the artifact's full potential, the galaxy would be at their mercy. The Theriz were already dangerous enough. They could not afford to let humanity rise as a new threat. Meanwhile, there were others, more ambitious members of the GDA who saw the artifact as a game changer. These members were not as concerned with the morality of the situation, but rather with the strategic advantage it could provide. They saw the artifact as a means of securing humanity's place at the top of the galactic hierarchy. With the power of the artifact, humanity could topple the Theriz, claim dominance, and lead the galaxy. Juno felt the weight of these divisions. She had always been a part of the GDA, representative of humanity's interests. But now she was beginning to see that not everyone shared her vision. The more the factions within the alliance bickered, the more isolated she became. The trust she had once shared with the alien species in the GDA was fraying, and the artifact only deepened her sense of alienation. She no longer felt like one of them. She was something else now, something more. But the true strain came from within her own team. Lieutenant Kiera had been Juno's right-hand officer for years. The two women had fought side by side, relying on each other in battle, trusting each other implicitly. They had shared everything: successes, failures, and the countless moments in between. But now, as Juno's reliance on the artifact grew, so did the distance between them. Kiera noticed the changes in her commanding officer long before anyone else. She saw the way Juno's temper flared, the way her decisions became more reckless, more driven by emotion than by strategy. The woman who had always been a calm, rational leader was slipping away, replaced by someone who was no longer in control. Kiera tried to talk to her, tried to reach her, but Juno was always distant, always focused on the artifact. "I'm not sure what's happening to you, Juno," Kiera said one evening, after another tense argument between the two. "You're not the same. You're not the woman I used to fight beside." Juno had tried to brush it off. "I'm fine, Kiera. You don't understand. You don't understand what this power could mean for us." But Kiera wasn't so sure. She didn't like the way Juno's eyes seemed to glow with a strange intensity whenever she touched the artifact. It was as though the power was consuming her, and Kiera feared what would happen if it wasn't stopped. "Juno," Kiera said softly, her voice filled with concern, "we're in this together. But I can't stand by and watch you destroy yourself. I won't let this artifact take you away from us." The words stung, but Juno didn't show it. Instead, she turned her gaze back to the artifact. "I'm doing what needs to be done, Kiera. You'll see." The fractures in their relationship were becoming more and more apparent, and it was clear that something would have to give. But even as Kiera felt the growing rift between them, she could not shake the feeling that there was something even more dangerous waiting in the shadows, a truth about the Theras that had yet to be revealed. The more Juno investigated the Theras, the more she realized that they weren't the true enemy. The Theras had been guarding something, a force far older than their empire itself. An ancient, near-mythical entity that had been the original creators of the artifact. The more Juno uncovered, the more she began to see that the Theras were just pawns in a much larger game. The artifact, it seemed, was only a piece of the puzzle, a puzzle that led to something far more powerful and far more dangerous. Juno's mind raced. The Theras were a threat, but they were only a symptom of a much greater problem. She now had to decide: pursue the Theras and defeat them, or follow this new trail and confront the force that had created the artifact. But in doing so, she knew that one wrong move could change the course of the entire war, and perhaps the galaxy itself. Her reliance on the artifact was growing stronger, and with it, the uncertainty of what lay ahead. The war with the Theras had been raging for weeks, each battle more brutal than the last. The Theras, once seen as the ultimate threat to the galaxy, had proven to be surprisingly organized and cunning. They had always been a formidable force, but now, as Juno led her coalition of human and alien troops into one of the most decisive battles of the war, she felt something shifting within her. It wasn't just the artifact something was happening to her. Something darker. It wasn't until she saw the Theras retreat, broken and defeated for the first time, that the truth came crashing down on her like a tidal wave. Her mind, clouded by the influence of the artifact, had been racing. She had never been more certain of her decisions, more driven by a primal desire for victory. But now, with the battle won and the adrenaline wearing off, clarity began to return. The things that had been happening to her, her growing aggression, her impulsive choices, her inability to control her emotions suddenly made sense. The artifact was not simply enhancing her. It was manipulating her, molding her into something far more dangerous than she had ever intended to become. The artifact's power was not just physical, it was psychological, bending her thoughts and emotions, nudging her toward the same violent, conquest-driven instincts that the Theras embodied. She was no longer sure if she was still acting as herself or if she had become a puppet of the artifact's will. And then came the revelation that shattered everything Juno had believed. The Theras were not the mindless conquerors she had thought them to be. They weren't just a threat to the galaxy, they had been guarding it. The Theras had been holding back a far greater danger, one that had been lurking in the shadows for millennia. The true enemy was not the Theras, nor even the artifact. It was the Kaiari, a race of ancient galactic overlords who had once ruled the entire galaxy with an iron fist. The Kaiari had created the artifact, and they had scattered its pieces across the galaxy to prepare the universe for their return. The artifact was a tool of their design, and its power wasn't meant to protect, it was meant to conquer, to reshape the galaxy in the Kyari's image. Juno felt the world she had fought to protect unraveling before her eyes. The artifact that had given her so much power, the one she had used to fight the Theras, was part of a plan much larger than anything she could have ever imagined. Humanity's rise to power, her newfound strength, it had all been orchestrated by the Kyari, whether by accident or design, she could no longer tell. The artifact was never meant to be a weapon of defense or victory. It had been designed to prepare her and all of humanity for the Kyari's return. To turn humanity into the perfect tool for their invasion. In that moment, Juno was faced with a devastating choice. She could continue using the artifact's power, fighting the Theras, and solidifying humanity's place in the galaxy. But doing so would mean falling deeper into the Kyari's trap. The more she used the artifact, the more she would be shaped into something they could control, something that would no longer be human. Or, she could destroy the artifact, risking everything: her newfound strength, the war against the Theras, and possibly humanity's survival. If she destroyed it, the Kyari would come. The artifact was the only thing keeping them at bay. But Juno knew that continuing on her current path meant risking the soul of humanity. Her mind reeled as she wrestled with the consequences. Each decision seemed to lead to the destruction of everything she had fought for. But then, as if the artifact could sense her internal conflict, it began to tighten its grip on her once again. Its influence was overwhelming, pushing her toward action, compelling her to make a decision that felt inevitable. Lieutenant Kiera had been watching from the sidelines for some time now, her growing concern turning to fear. She had seen the changes in Juno, seen how the artifact was slowly consuming her, turning her into someone she no longer recognized. The woman who had once been her closest friend, her commander, was slipping away, replaced by a version of herself driven by rage and unyielding power. Now Kiera confronted Juno with a truth that tore at her heart. "Juno," Kiera said, her voice barely a whisper, "you're becoming them. The Kyari, the Theras, they've always sought control, to dominate others. If you keep using that artifact, you'll be no better than they are. Please, stop. We don't need to fight this war with force. We can win with our minds, with our hearts." Juno's eyes hardened. She had heard this before, but this time, something in Kiera's voice reached her, cut through the fog in her mind. She could feel the artifact inside her, pulling her toward violence, toward revenge. It was so easy to give in, to let the artifact's power wash over her, to make the decisions for her. But then, in a flash of clarity, Juno understood what she had to do. She couldn't let humanity become the very thing they had fought against. She couldn't let herself be shaped by the Kyari's influence. The artifact was powerful, but it was not worth the cost. She had to sever the connection. She had to destroy it, no matter the consequences. With a determined breath, Juno made the painful decision. She activated the sequence to sever her bond with the artifact, knowing that doing so would leave her powerless, vulnerable. The strength, the agility, the sharpness of mind, all of it would be gone. But it was a price she was willing to pay. She couldn't allow herself to become a weapon of the Kyari. As the artifact's influence began to fade, Juno felt herself return to herself, her thoughts clearing. But the battle was far from over. The Theras, though defeated for now, would return. The Kyari, once awakened, would come for the galaxy. And Juno, no longer enhanced, had to rely on her strength of will, her humanity, to fight for what was right. The war was far from over. But now, Juno was ready to face it as herself, free of the artifact's influence, no longer a puppet, but a leader who would fight for a future that belonged to humanity. In that moment, Juno's sacrifice wasn't just about power. It was about humanity's soul, about holding on to what made them unique, their ability to choose, to resist, to change. And she would fight for that, no matter the cost. The battle against the Theras was nothing like the ones Juno had fought before. The artifact, once a symbol of her strength, was now gone, leaving her feeling vulnerable and raw. Her muscles ached with every movement, her mind no longer sharpened by the artifact's enhancements. She was just a human once more. But in this rawness, she found something more powerful than any artificial strength. She found her humanity. Juno faced the Theras commander, a towering figure clad in black armor, its eyes burning with the intensity of a lifetime of conquest. The battlefield around them was a wreckage of shattered ships and fallen soldiers. The Tharas had been formidable, but they weren't invincible. Juno knew that if she wanted to win, it would not be through power or brute force. It would be through something they had underestimated: her ability to endure, to fight on when others had fallen. She had fought for the survival of humanity, for the chance to create a future, and that was what would guide her now. The Tharas commander lunged, his weapon crackling with energy, but Juno was ready. She dodged his strike with an agility that came from years of battle experience, not the artifact's power. Her heart pounded as she countered, landing blows with precision and speed. She wasn't invincible anymore, but she was relentless. She would fight until the end, until the last breath, for the people who believed in her, for the future that depended on her victory. Every strike felt heavier without the artifact's enhancements, but Juno's spirit burned brighter than ever. The fight seemed to stretch on forever, but with each exchange, Juno could feel herself growing more certain. She was fighting not for glory, not for power, but for something far more important: her people's future. The Tharas, despite their might, were not prepared for the kind of fight that humans could bring when they were cornered. The battle was not one of raw strength, but of willpower. And Juno knew, deep down, that humanity's greatest weapon had always been their ability to adapt, to never give up, even when faced with the impossible. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the Tharas commander fell. Juno stood over him, exhausted, bloodied and battered, but victorious. The battlefield around her fell silent as the Tharas' forces retreated. The war was over, but the cost had been immense. Her team was decimated, and the universe would never be the same. The artifact was destroyed, but in its place, humanity had proven something far more important. They could win, not because of power, but because of their unyielding will to survive. But as the last of the Tharas ships fled into the void, something far worse emerged from the shadows. The Kayari. Juno had known the legend's ancient, godlike beings who had once ruled the galaxy and who had disappeared long before humanity's rise. They were thought to be myths, stories told by the oldest civilizations, but now they stood before her, their presence radiating an overwhelming sense of power and control. They had watched, biding their time, as humanity fought the Tharas. They had seen the artifact's power and knew that humanity, despite their rawness, was different from any species they had encountered. "We were waiting for this moment," the voice of the Kayari leader echoed, his tone a mix of amusement and cold superiority. "You think your victory over the Tharas has proven your worth, human? You have no idea what you've just awoken. The galaxy is not your playground. We are the true rulers, and we have watched as you've tried to play with powers far beyond your understanding." Juno's heart raced, but she refused to show fear. She had fought for this galaxy, for humanity's place in it, and she would not back down now. The Kayari's gaze felt like a weight pressing against her chest, but she held her ground. "We will not bow to you," she said, her voice steady despite the crushing presence of the Kayari. "We may be weak in your eyes, but we've fought for everything we have. And we'll keep fighting for as long as it takes." The Kayari leader chuckled darkly, his eyes narrowing. "You misunderstand, Captain West. We don't need to break you. We don't need to destroy you. We simply need you to understand your place. Your strength, your will, these things are impressive, but they are insignificant in the grand design of the universe. You are merely ants scurrying across a stone." Juno's resolve hardened. She had heard enough of this arrogance. She had been underestimated her entire life by the Tharas, by the T-Zoer, and now by the Kayari. But humanity's greatest strength had always been their ability to rise above what others thought was possible. The Kayari may have controlled the galaxy once, but they hadn't accounted for the relentless spirit of the human race. The Kayari leader stepped forward, his presence suffocating, and for a moment, Juno wondered if the galaxy would ever be free from the shadow of these ancient beings. But in that moment, she realized the true meaning of her struggle. It wasn't about defeating the Kayari or proving humanity's superiority. It was about the fight itself. Humanity's refusal to be broken, to be controlled. Their ability to stand up against the impossible again and again. "We're not your playthings," Juno said, her voice fierce with determination. "We're not weak, and we'll prove that to you." The Kyrie leader regarded her for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "Perhaps you will, Captain West. But understand this, you have no idea what you're truly up against. We will see if your species can endure what's to come." With that, the Kyrie vanished, leaving Juno standing on the precipice of a new galaxy. Her victory had come at a great cost, but humanity had proven its worth. It had shown that no matter how powerful the enemy, they would fight for their future, their freedom, and their survival. As Juno gazed out at the stars, the question lingered in the back of her mind: was humanity truly weak, or were they the galaxy's last hope in the face of forces far too powerful to understand? The future was uncertain. The galaxy was no longer the same. And yet, Juno knew one thing for sure: humanity's fight was far from over. They had survived against overwhelming odds before, and they would do so again. The war had only just begun.